Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. It is do or die day for Biden. He's got his big boy press conference this evening, which, by the way, we're going to be giving you reaction to, so make sure to stay tuned. After the press conference, we will be bringing you whatever the hell happens. So that's going on. Meanwhile, we wanted to bring you up to speed with everything that's been happening here in Washington. Yesterday, Pelosi basically knifed Biden on his favorite morning program. That would be Morning Joe. Obama maybe behind the scenes moving against Biden. We're reading the tea leaves on that big buzzy George Clooney op-ed calling for Biden to drop out and providing some new insights into Biden's decline. Polls continuing to look very dire. Apparently, New York, now a battleground state. Great job, guys. Way to go. So sounding the alarms there. Also looking at the fact that there's going to be a huge impact down ballot if Biden remains at the top of the ticket. And voters, Democratic Party voters, very much want him to move on. So we'll look at all of that. Meanwhile, Karine Jean-Pierre caught once again in another lie. And this one, again, specifically with regards to Biden's health as Parkinson's concerns mount. And Trump is getting closer to his VP pick. He made some comments to Brian Kilmeade yesterday. So we're taking a look at that, giving our best, again, reading the tea leaves of whatever we can discern there. Although his calculus may be changing moment by moment, too, as this landscape shifts.
We'll get into that. I think it's very important. And part of the reason why I think he has been waiting so long, this event really did change things, I believe. As Krystal said, we are going to be doing coverage of the Biden, quote unquote, big boy press conference. It is scheduled to start at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Biden has never showed up to anything on his life, even whenever he was cogent and with it. So just bear with us. We will see.
Getting close to his bedtime, though. I don't know. It's outside of the 10 to 4 zone.
We'll see, Krystal. If he shows up at like 7, I'll be happy, because knowing him, you just never know. I mean, the White House press corps has been telling me they're almost starting 1.5, 2 hours late just because Karine Jean-Pierre allegedly tied up in meetings, aka just sitting in a briefing room going through all of the answers and coaching and things like that. So we'll see. Maybe they can shoot him up with something and time the dosage right, and unlike they were last time. But yep, you can support us, breakingpoints.com. We really appreciate it. We'll email the link out to all of our premium subscribers, etc. Now, as Krystal said, yesterday was actually a landmark day, and today as well, here in Washington, where multiple Democratic leaders, elites, and others are now signaling that they are trying to open a space where Joe Biden could drop out. Nancy Pelosi, in particular, made headlines all across America yesterday in this interview with Morning Joe, where she appeared to say that Biden needs to, quote, make his decision, even though he's already allegedly made a decision, and also laying out a potential timeline of kicking him out of the race. Let's take a listen.
So, Madam Speaker, you just went through the president's record, but let me ask you about the current moment. Does he have your support to be the head of the Democratic ticket?
As long as the president it's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short. I think overwhelming support of the caucus. It's not for me to say. I'm not the head of the caucus anymore. But he's beloved. He is respected. And people want him to make that decision, not me.
He has said he has made the decision. He has said firmly this week he is going to run. Do you want him to run?
I want him to do whatever he decides to do. And that's the way it is. Whatever he decides, we go with. I think it's really important, and I would hope everyone would join in, to let him deal with this NATO conference. This is a very big deal. Over 30 heads of state are here. He is the host of it, and that means not just hosting, it means orchestrating the discussion and setting the agenda, and he's doing so magnificently. And I've said to everyone, let's just hold off. Whatever you're thinking, either tell somebody privately, but you don't have to put that out on the table.
So, Krystal, there's a lot that we can say about that. Number one, as many have pointed out, they keep saying he needs to make his decision. He said he's making a decision. He sent you a letter. He said, I made my decision. I'm running. There's no more discussion. But that NATO comment, so we've been talking about this all week. Traffic is hell here in Washington. There is a NATO summit. All of the NATO leaders are here in town. So she says very clearly, look, let's get past the whole NATO thing, and then we can make our decision. And it's like, but he's allegedly made his decision.
Right.
So what are you saying? It's like, well, it would not be a bad time to drop out. I don't know. I have trouble dealing with this because she immediately walked it back. She said, as far as Biden should run again, she said Biden could still win the election. You know, in general, there's so much behind the scenes. You were reading the tea leaves. It's almost like criminology, where we try and read what Kremlin officials would not say as a way of saying, like, oh, that's what they're secretly saying. So what did you make of this?
This woman, whatever you think of her, she understands the DC game.
Yeah.
She's very strategic, and she was very specific with her wording there.
That is true.
And, you know, credit to Ryan, who immediately when he heard those comments, he's like, it sounds like she's saying, wait until the 30 foreign leaders are out of town, and then we put the knife in.
Right.
That's what it sounds like. And it doesn't just sound like that to me and Ryan and others who are, you know, on the outside looking in. Apparently that is the message that congressional Democrats heard as well. That basically like, listen, hold your fire. But once these people are out of town, then it could be open season. And so there is somewhat of an expectation already after those comments, after I think the George Clooney op-ed, which we're going to talk about, was also very influential for whatever that means about the state of our country. But you already had more leaders coming out yesterday. So clearly the aggressive attempts early in the week to shut everybody up and say, move it along, this is what's happening, stop resisting. Clearly those attempts failed. And, you know, the other thing that people point out is Pelosi's language there is very sort of like mob boss-esque. It's like, yeah, he's made his decision. Well, he hasn't really made the right decision, so he's got to make the right decision here. We're waiting for him to make a decision when he's already tried to make it as clear as possible that his decision has been made. So very, very noteworthy. There's also some reporting now this morning from Politico, which is like, you know, the insider of insider publications, that she does want him to go, and that she has been saying that to other Democrats. And even though obviously she's not the head of the caucus technically anymore, no one should be fooled about the fact that this is probably the most powerful Democrat in this city still, outside of the President of the United States, perhaps even more powerful than the President of the United States in a sense, because her claim to power has always been her relationship with donors. And no one controls the purse strings the way that Nancy Pelosi does. That's why she has been so influential for over a decade now in this caucus. And part of the other reporting we have out also is that donations have all but dried up. The donor class wants him gone. I have a lot of questions about Pelosi maybe pulling some of those strings behind the scenes to say, listen, do not give to him. We need to push him out. You can use your checkbook to help make that happen. So a lot that is really fascinating there. You know, prior to her comments and prior to the Clooney op-ed, I was starting to think like, this is that he's done it. Like he sort of quashed the opposition. He scared people into silence. He's running out the clock. Like his strategy appears to be successful. Yesterday felt like a real turning point that made this once again a super, super live question where maybe now the odds are in the other direction.
That's a good point. I would say yesterday I was at 95%. Today I'm like 75. So I still think he's going to stay. I think he's an arrogant narcissist, although the knives are beginning to come out.
Yeah.
Whether these people will have the courage to actually do what it takes to stab him, we will see. Now, some of the tea leaves that we can read, not even tea leaves, I mean, this is out in the open. Let's put this up there, for example, on the screen. Here you got Congressman Richie Torres, who completely flipped on a dime, and today has released the statement. He says, regardless of where one stands on the question of Biden's political future, the intra-party mixed messaging strikes me as deeply
So this is the old statement.
Yeah, sorry.
This was the original statement that was like, everybody just shut up, this is bad for us.
That's right. So this was the original one. It was like, this is bad, it's deeply self-destructive. Now go to the next one, because the next one is where it's important. Literally the day after, he says, in determining how to proceed, there must be a serious reckoning with the down-ballot effect of whomever we nominate. What matters is not how we feel, but what the numbers tell us. An unsentimental analysis of the cold, hard numbers, which have no personal feelings or political loyalties, should inform what we decide and whom we nominate. If we're going to choose a particular path, we should be clear-eyed about its consequences. Blindness is not bliss amid the terrifying threat of a Trump presidency. And, you know, one of the things I was reading into this, and I'm sure you did as well, is what do we know about Richie Torres, you know, in particular in context of this Israel conflict? Correct. Well, no, but he's a donor mouthpiece,
Yeah,
yes?
that's right.
So what's been happening is people are panicking behind the scenes,
Yeah.
the donors, the people, the elites, and he is getting significant upward pressure the same way that Pelosi is by some of these Hollywood, financial, and other elites in the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Reid Hoffman, right? You know, we don't really know where he stands, I believe, but
We do know where Reid Hoffman stands because Dimitri Malhorn, who,
Right.
by the way, counterpoints in the debate
That's
with
right.
Dimitri, and Dimitri's his donor advisor, and Dimitri has been the most aggressive Biden defender on the donor side, but he's kind of alone on an island in terms of the donor class sentiment.
So that's where I was confused because I know Dimitri said it. I know Reid has put out like some tepid statement, but I also had understood that there was like infighting within the Democratic donor world, like around Reid Hoffman. So I don't know. And I do also think that these things are moving quickly. All we could say is when you see the donor mouthpieces like Richie and then begin to change things up. And then let's pair it here next. Let's put this up there on the screen. Senator Chuck Schumer, quote, privately signaling to donors he would open to a Democratic presidential ticket that isn't led by Joe Biden. I think we see that the coup is coming from below in terms of the donor class, and the elected politicians are stuck between a rock and a hard place where they need to publicly signal support for Biden, but they're not stupid. These are selfish narcissists. Because as Richie said, look at the polls, and we're going to do a whole segment today. It's craziness. It is absolute savagery for the Democrats across the table. We are looking at a Trump 350, 380 electoral vote possibility now. That's a whole other ballgame from where we were, even in a race where Trump was likely to win by, let's say, 1 or 2 points in the popular vote. Now it's like, well, we could be looking at Obama margins, 5-6%.
Well, the other thing that Chuck Schumer and Richie Torres have in common, both from New York.
Yeah,
and
great point.
There are polls coming out in New York. We're going to cover them in the polls segment of the show that have New York as a battleground state, that have swing districts in New York that Biden is getting absolutely destroyed in. Things look bad in a state that should be deep blue, that there should be zero uncertainty about. In fact, you had the lieutenant governor of New York also come out and say Joe Biden should get off the ticket. There's something else that's very significant about Richie Torres, though, which is that part of the Biden strategy has been to lock in the Congressional Black Caucus and try to racialize the case in favor of him staying, which is really bizarre because the person you're most immediately blocking is a Black woman in Kamala Harris. But put that aside, they're trying to say like, oh, and you see this online all the time too, oh, it's all these white men like George Clooney and Stephen King who want Joe Biden out of the race, and Michael Bennett and the like. So the fact that you have Richie Torres, Democrat of color, member of the CBC, coming out and saying these things, that's why he's more significant in a sense than the average bear, and also because he has made himself so prominent with all of his Israel madness.
Oh, good point.
Yeah, so I do think you're right, though, about them speaking for the donors. I think that there's a lot to that. And so just as best as I can understand, the overwhelming majority of donors, Joe Biden, he has never been super cozy with the donor class up until, I mean, you know, it's a little complex because obviously he was a great friend of the credit card industry, the banking industry, so I'm not gonna pretend like he didn't have donor ties. That would be ridiculous. But he was getting reelected for the Senate in a safe seat in Delaware. So he didn't build out the type of extensive donor network where these people are personal friends the way that a Nancy Pelosi and a Chuck Schumer have done. Schumer in New York, that's one major fundraising base, the other in California. They're the types that have these personal relationships, long time, going back decades. Joe Biden isn't that guy. And there is something with like, you know, Obama world has always, even before his decline, kind of looked down at him as not being, you know, as sophisticated as they are. And that also filters into the way the donor set has looked at him. So most of them don't have these long-term personal friendships with him in the same way that they do with like an Obama also. And so my impression, based on the reporting and based on talking to Abigail Disney and you know, seeing what's coming out from these groups from people who have good sources, is that most of the donor class does want him to go, prefers another candidate at the top of the ticket. Reid Hoffman and Dimitri Malhorn, like I said, is his donor advisor. They seem to be fairly lonely in that. And as I mentioned before, reporting also says that fundraising is dead, all but dead for the Biden campaign at the moment. And not just big dollar fundraising, but also grassroots fundraising, to his claim that it's just a cabal of elites who want him out. And we'll show you this in the poll section as well. Now, a majority of Democrats, including majority, by the way, of Black Democrats, want Joe Biden off the top of the ticket. So it is a weird coalition of people when you're talking about, the Pod Save Bros and online lefties and Richie Torres that want this guy out of the race. And it's a weird coalition of people who want him in. Bernie Sanders and AOC backing up Biden.
Ilhan Omar.
And Ilhan Omar, for
Ro-Khanna.
whatever reasons they've decided to take this position. They've taken this position. So it is a strange, non-ideological coalition of people on both sides of this equation that crosses all class, gender, race, every boundary you can possibly think of. Although I will say, the olds seem to be more inclined to want to keep Joe Biden on the ticket than the younger part of the party.
We'll get to that, and I'll piss off some of the boomers in our audience. Let's also, we could be remiss if we didn't point out as well that sitting senators are actually beginning to sound the alarm, actually on the record. Here we have Senator Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
I am deeply concerned about Joe Biden winning this November, because it is an existential threat to the country if Donald Trump wins. So I think that we have to reach a conclusion as soon as possible. And I think Joe Biden, as the Democratic nominee, has my support.
So that's what he had to say. But then probably the most significant was this. Let's put this up there on the screen, because this isn't just about deep concerns. This is a sitting Democratic senator, the Senator Peter Welch, Democrat from Vermont. Biden should withdraw for the good of the country. We need him to put us first, as he has done before. Now, as always, we start with the platitudes. I have great respect for Joe Biden.
He's amazing.
He's a great man. He's an honor.
President ever.
He saved our country from a tyrant. He is a man of uncommon uncommon amongst uncommon men, as David Goggins would say. He cares deeply about our democracy. He has been one of the best presidents of our time. But I, like folks across the country, am worried about November's election. The stakes could not be higher. We cannot unsee President Biden's disastrous debate performance. We cannot ignore or dismiss the valid questions raised since that night. I understand why Biden wants to run. He saved us from Donald Trump. But for the good of the country, I am calling on President Biden to withdraw from the race. So that is the explicit call of withdrawal coming from Peter Welch. We've seen the alarm sounded by Senator Blumenthal, Senator Bennett. These are moderate senators. Patty Murray. And I think, what do these people all have in common? They're centrists. And I think, Krystal, what you were talking about a little bit earlier with these progressives is they almost feel in a way they have to overcompensate to defend Biden. Whereas these folks, they're just channeling the donor class, and they probably have a little bit more room within the intra-party coalition to speak their mind. I don't know what it gets to, but they have a confidence, which I respect. Look, it's not easy to actually come out and be like, hey, you gotta go. But what we also have learned is that these people, Bennett, Welch, and others, what do they all say when you press them a little bit more? I'm speaking on behalf of my colleagues. I'm speaking on behalf of everybody in the caucus. And let's be honest, they're not stupid. They know. They knew about Feinstein. They knew about the others. And this is just getting to a completely untenable point, because some of them actually do believe their rhetoric about the stakes. And I think Peter Welch might be one of those folks where he's like, I actually am really freaked out by Trump. We can't handle this. Like, you are going down to historic proportions. We've got to make a change. And that's why he felt the need.
Yeah, it's interesting with Peter Welch. I've actually known him for a long time, because back in my very early cable news days, when I was a guest on the Dylan Ratigan show, Peter Welch was a regular guy. He was a congressman from Vermont at that point. And, Dylan always Dylan would have Bernie on all the time too, before most of the country knew who Bernie Sanders was. And he always prized people who had, some integrity and would say things that weren't necessarily the party line. And Peter Welch fit that bill. So it doesn't totally surprise me that he's one of the early people to come out and have a little bit of courage here. And I think you're right. I think it really is separating out, okay, number one, there's a whole bunch of political incentives at play. Now, Peter Welch, Vermont is a very safe Democratic seat, so I don't think he's particularly concerned about his reelect. I also don't think he's up for reelection for a while. So that's kind of pushed to the side for him. There are the donor considerations, which are pushing in the direction of coming out publicly and saying something. And, there's also just do I have a shred of integrity? When I sat there for years and said Republicans are cowards, they're saying behind the scenes that they don't like Donald Trump, but they don't say shit when they get in front of a camera, am I now going to be that same thing on the Democratic side?
It's true.
Right?
I mean, right? We're watching blue MAGA behavior.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
the parallels are incredible, honestly, and including in like Biden's behavior and the way that he's approached this and the way that rather than what Democrats wanted him to do was, okay, prove to us you're okay, right? Like, come out, do some stuff so we can look at you and go, all right, I think he can be all right through the fall. I mean, another 4 years is a whole other question though, but they just are like, all right, let's just see if you could get through the fall. Instead of doing that, he instead is like issuing threats and trying to scare people into submission and saying effectively, like, I'll blow up this whole thing if you all don't just get on board. I think part of what we're seeing too is that tactic may have backfired. I think people were really insulted by that. Also, some of the language that came out from the Biden campaign originally about like the bedwetting brigade or whatever, I think that was very insulting as well. And these are human beings who have their own egos and who don't want to just, be sort of have their legitimate concerns pushed aside or be constantly gaslit or bullied or lied to. And so I think that could be playing into this moment as well, where it's possible as the week has worn on and people have really thought about that letter, it has curdled like sour milk.
I think you're right. I just think, man, there's so much going on here where today really is a big day. We have the press conference, but also today is Thursday. So that means that tomorrow the Congress is all going to be flying back home. So if there's ever anything that's going to happen, it's going to be tonight. And so, and by the way, we actually had another congressman who came on CNN this morning around 5 in the morning, and he says, I'm getting closer and closer to appreciating that as much as I respect Joe Biden, what he's done, what George Clooney said yesterday was really powerful in that he saved democracy in 2020, but he's got to do it again in 2024, and that he basically opens the door to saying, I think what I've heard from the debate is that instead of saying, look, let me show you I can do this, he's kind of just went at us, and I don't think that helped him. That letter did not help him amongst colleagues. So admitting there that the forceful Trumpian strategy of, watch me, just watch me. And it's like, dude, it's been 2 weeks to the day.
We've been watching.
Yeah.
That hasn't helped you.
It's been 2 weeks to the day, 14 days since his debate performance. His first press conference is today? 14 days to set up a press conference, and you've been doing these BS scripted events off of a teleprompter. The only questions you're taking are from freaking donors. And not you
fed questions to the radio host too.
The only reporters
reading off notes.
The only reporters you're taking questions from are people who you gave the questions to.
Yeah,
this is madness.
And then the call in to Morning Joe. I mean, that was really the big offensive this week. Was like, I'm going to do this call in. I'm going to sound really forceful. Which of course you can have aides sitting beside you. He admits he's reading off his notes at one point.
He's on speakerphone with his aides.
It's still incoherent. Yeah. Still like wildly incoherent. But this is the best you're going to get apparently. Puts out that letter, tries to assert, meets with the CBC, starts calling people, trying to wrangle everybody in. By the way, I also saw they're already starting to put in calls to delegates because they're worried about a delegate coup at the convention as well.
Good point.
There's this, conscience clause that technically means that they don't have to 100% vote for Joe Biden, even though they're Joe Biden delegates. So they're starting to get worried about that. So, it shows you, though, that all of those efforts at the beginning of the week, which, again, there were a couple days there when I was like, I think this might have worked. People might just be too cowardly and just shut up, and he may just grind it out. It's looking a lot more tenuous today, and that's why that press conference, there was one report from, Edward Isaac Dovier, that a lot of Democrats are actually hoping that he face plants at the press conference because it will make their decision easier to come out publicly.
Well, hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.